I stood ramrod straight under the high-arched banners of Camp Liberty Auditorium, the overhead lights catching the silver thread of my dress uniform like frost on steel. The room hummed with polite chatter, officers' families, dignitaries, a handful of local reporters. My captain's bars were newly pinned, still foreign on my shoulders, the quiet weight of responsibility settling into bone. And my family? They were in the second row, whispering and smirking. 2 hours earlier, in my mother's driveway, my brother had snorted at my uniform and called it a costume. His wife, Amber, waved a paper like a flag, the signed title transfer to my grandfather's '67 Mustang, my inheritance, the car we rebuilt every summer until his hands shook too much to hold a wrench. We already found a buyer. She'd grinned. 50 grand. Not bad for old junk. I still felt the bruise of that moment like a second pulse behind my ribs. General Whitaker stepped up to the lectern with his measured gravity, the room settling into attention as if drawn by a tide. He held a thin leather folder. Not the standard one for pinning promotions, not the ceremonial script, but something else. He didn't look at me. He looked at the audience. Today, he began, voice steady as a marching cadence, we recognize a service member whose name has shown up in file after file not because she asked for attention, but because she refused to look away when duty called. Captain Emily Carter. He opened the folder. I saw one page, one heading, one name. It's not just a promotion we mark today. It's the reading, on record, of a special commendation and an assignment that bears only her name. Behind me, I heard Amber's breath hitch. Daniel shifted. My mother's purse clinked against the floor as her hands stilled. As of this morning, General Whitaker continued, the Department of the Army has approved Captain Carter as the sole custodian of her grandfather's veteran legacy grant, including protective stewardship of E. Assets tied directly to his service record and to her ongoing community mission, assets bearing only her name. He paused deliberately. My brother went sheet white. The general looked up and caught my eye. A quiet nod, a promise. Then he read aloud the single line that locked the room into a stunned, brittle silence. And the heirloom vehicle identified in the certification, known as Redbird, is affirmed under federal protection during transfer to Captain Emily Carter, pursuant to her grandfather's veteran designation and legacy agreement. The words echoed across polished floors and formal boots, a ripple of murmurs, a shot of air into the lungs of justice. I didn't look at my family. I didn't need to. I felt it. The freeze, the sudden math, the understanding that the thing they tried to sell behind my back was not just mine. It was recognized, recorded, protected, and now read into a microphone by a general on a military stage to a room full of witnesses. Not because I was petty, because I had a promise to keep. I had promised my grandfather I'd protect what mattered. I was a soldier before I knew the Army would ever have me. That's something only small towns and stubborn people understand. Growing up in Maplewood, Virginia meant Friday night football was religion, and Pop Carter's auto shop was church on Saturdays. My grandfather taught me torque values and integrity with the same steady breath. You tighten a lug nut as if someone's life depends on it. Because one day it might, he'd say, leaning over the bright red '67 Mustang we called Redbird. I was 10 the first time I bled on that car, slicing my palm on a sharp edge while trying to reach a rusted bolt. Pop didn't coddle me, just handed me a clean rag and showed me how to wrap it tight. A little blood wipes away, he said. A bent frame, a compromised axle. Those never forgive laziness. Pop was Army through and through, a signal specialist with hands that could coax life out of dying machines. When I enlisted at 18, he didn't cry, didn't cheer. He nodded, pressed an old dog tag into my palm and said, "Stand steady, Em." For 12 years I did. I stood steady through basic training that broke me down and built me back stronger. Through deployments where sand found its way into your teeth and letters took 3 weeks to arrive. I kept my head down, did my job, earned the respect of people whose respect mattered. At home, things were murkier. My mother, Patricia, loved me in a soft, worried way that turned to avoidance when things got messy. My brother, Daniel, loved the idea of me, the version that made him look good when he mentioned me at barbecues. But at home, he called what I did playing soldier, with a laugh just sharp enough to cut. His wife, Amber, didn't bother, pretending. To her, uniforms were theater and values were slogans. She liked the idea of money and clean lines, quick flips and easy wins. When Pop passed away last year, the world split into before and after. He left Redbird to me, told me in a letter I found under the passenger mat. You kept her alive all these years, so now she'll keep you steady. Don't let anyone sell your spine for parts. The car stayed in my mother's garage while I finished my deployment. I visited when I could, starting to build something Pop would have approved of in the spare moments between missions. A plan for a veteran youth mechanics program, teaching at-risk teens how to rebuild engines, how to find confidence in precision. Major Rachel Anderson, my best friend from deployment, used to joke that I could motivate a bolt to move through pure sincerity. Make it a project, Cap, she'd say. Honor the old man properly. I drafted budgets on leave. I called local veteran networks and mentors. I sent an application for a small veteran legacy grant that Pop had once been too modest to claim in his name. I refiled it as a dual-generation legacy initiative, honoring a veteran's skill by helping the next generation learn it through his heir. Redbird would be the heart of the program. The garage would be the classroom. I named it Redbird Hands. I told my family all this at a Sunday dinner 3 months ago. Daniel laughed with beer in his hand. So, charity mechanic school? That's not exactly MBA material. Amber tucked hair behind her ear and asked whether I'd considered selling the car. First to fund something serious. My mother looked down at her plate. Silence folded over the table like damp cloth. I went back to base, kept my head down, prepared for my promotion board. Major Anderson grilled me on leadership scenarios until past midnight. We ran, we drilled, we studied. I told myself the noise at home was just that. Noise. People often mock what they don't understand. Then came the message. Promotion to captain approved. Ceremony scheduled for the first week of June. I invited my mom. Out of politeness, I invited Daniel and Amber. I asked Pop's old VFW buddies to come too. 2 days before the ceremony, I went to Maplewood to check on Redbird, to rest. That's when I found Scout, a soot-gray cat, thin as a wire and quiet as a long breath, perched on Redbird's hood, like she'd always belonged. She watched me from under her lashes, unblinking, serious. When I opened the garage, she slipped down and wound around my ankles exactly once, a peace treaty, not dependency, and posted herself by the driver's door. I put out a dish of water. She drank without letting her gaze leave me. Pop always said that every garage had a soul. Maybe ours wore whiskers. The morning of my promotion ceremony dawned with the kind of clarity that makes Virginia summers bearable. Blue skies stretched taut, air washed clean by an overnight shower. I'd slept in my childhood room, listening to the tick of settling beams and the far-off chirp of summer insects, thinking of Pop's letter under the mat and the grant I hadn't heard back from yet. I rose early to press my uniform one final time, the iron hissing steam over blue fabric that represented everything I'd worked for. The brass buttons reflected my face in fragments, eyes serious, mouth set in the determined line Pop used to call my battle face. Not anger, just resolve. Downstairs, the kitchen light was already on. Strange. My mother usually slept in on Saturdays. I found Amber at the kitchen table with a stack of papers, and Daniel at the sink, humming. My mother was making coffee with careful attention, the way people do when they don't want to look someone in the eye. Daniel said, too bright. We took care of something for you. You can thank us later. Amber turned the paper so I could see. Title transfer. 1967. Ford Mustang buyer. Clint Rogers. Maplewood Motors. Seller. Patricia Carter. Co-signer. Daniel. Carter? I read it 3 times because shock makes everything fuzzy around the edges. You sold Redbird? I heard my voice from somewhere above my head. Amber smiled like she was presenting a cake. Not sold yet. Arranged. 50,000 cash. We can close this afternoon. We did you a favor, Em. Old cars eat money. My mother's hands shook as she set down a mug. Honey, they said it was a good price. Your grandfather wouldn't want you to be burdened. She's not a burden, I said. She's my inheritance, my classroom, my promise. Daniel rolled his eyes. Promise to what exactly? Teach delinquents how to fix carburetors? Come on, this is real money, Em. You're a soldier, not a mechanic. I still don't know how I didn't scream. Instead, something in me went still and cold, like the moment before you pull a trigger. All I need, I said, and I remember how Scout went motionless in the doorway, is for you to not sell the one thing Pop trusted me to protect. Amber tapped the paper with a glossy nail. It's family property. We had to make a decision. You're always gone. Family property? I whispered. He left her to me. Legally murky, Amber said. There wasn't a notarized transfer. There was under the mat, with Pop's careful script and a backup copy with our family's attorney. I kept my voice level. Cancel it. Daniel's laugh was short, incredulous. We're heading over after the ceremony. You should be thanking us. I stood there in my dress blues, breath tight in my chest, tasting metal. Fine, I said. Come to the ceremony, and then we'll see. Because in that exact second, my phone buzzed. A new email. Subject line, Veteran Legacy Grant. Decision. I didn't open it in front of them. I pocketed my phone like a secret and walked out to the driveway, where Scout slipped into my shadow, silent and sure. The ride to Camp Liberty felt longer than the highway miles. The world looked waxed and overlit, every box hedge crisp, every flag stiff. I checked my email. In the back seat while my mother talked about flowers and seating, my hands shook as I tapped. Congratulations, Captain Carter. The committee is proud to award you the Veteran Legacy Community Grant. Your program, Redbird Hands, has been approved for a pilot year. A follow-up note from the base liaison added, per your request, we have included the heirloom vehicle, Redbird, in the Protective E. Legacy documentation to prevent unauthorized sale or transfer during the transition. We will coordinate with General Whitaker's office for ceremonial acknowledgement. I exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for months. Major Rachel Anderson fired a text at the same time. Heard the news. Whitaker's going to announce it in your ceremony. Says it's what honor looks like when it walks around. Proud of you. The rest, you already know. The ceremony. The announcement. The moment when justice slid into place like the last piece of a puzzle you've been working on for years. What you don't know is what happened after. The private reckoning. The rebuilding. The way dignity reasserts itself not with a shout, but with the quiet confidence of work well done. And that's the story I'm here to tell. The auditorium emptied in ripples of polite conversation, congratulatory handshakes, and the soft rustle of dress uniforms. I shook hands with General Whitaker, who held my gaze a moment longer than necessary. Custodianship is service, he said simply. You'll do fine. Major Anderson hugged me, a quick, fierce embrace that smelled of regulation shampoo and gunmetal. You did it, she whispered. Hi, Cap. I nodded, my throat tight. This wasn't how I'd imagined my promotion day. A mix of professional triumph and personal betrayal, all wrapped in starched fabric and duty. Outside, beneath sunlight that felt a touch too sharp, my family waited by my mother's sedan. Amber started the second I stepped off the path. You planned this, she hissed, arms crossed tight over her designer blouse. How could you blindside us like that with legal documents and a public spectacle? I laughed, a sound that surprised us both, low and tired. You forged a sale of my inheritance and invited the buyer to my promotion ceremony. Daniel crossed his arms, mirroring his wife unconsciously. You think you're better than us now, because some general guy read your name out loud? No, I said, feeling strangely calm. I think I finally look at myself the way Pop did. Amber's voice sharpened. Mom's house, Mom's garage. We have rights. I kept my voice level, aware of other families watching from a distance. You had kindness. You decided to spend it. Daniel's jaw clenched. So what now, Captain? Now, I said. I go get Redbird. I move her to a proper, insured space with the program. You will not set foot near her without my consent, and I keep my promise. Amber scoffed. What promise? To a car? To a legacy. My mother finally spoke, eyes wet. Emily, I didn't want any of this. Her voice wavered, hands clutching her purse straps. Another truth that rings when you touch it. She wanted not to choose, but not choosing is still a choice. The drive back to Maplewood passed in a silence so thick it felt like another passenger. Daniel stared out the window. Amber scrolled furiously through her phone, and my mother drove with both hands gripping the wheel at exactly 10 and 2, like she was taking a driving test. Scout was waiting on the garage step when we arrived, tail wrapped around her legs like a question mark. She hopped into the back of my SUV without hesitation, as if she'd been traveling with me all my life, and settled with her chin on the edge, watching through the hatch as if to say, I'm inventory now. You are responsible. I'd called ahead for a trailer. It was waiting in the driveway, rented from U-Haul and paid for with my own credit card. We rolled Redbird onto it with the methodical care of a ritual. I tightened the straps as if someone's life depended on it. Because it always might. Clint from Maplewood Motors appeared at the end of the driveway just as I was securing the last strap. He wore a dealership polo and a practiced shrug. "No hard feelings," he said, hands in pockets. "I buy and sell. But for what it's worth, lady, that car belongs with someone who knows what she's worth. Sometimes even the opportunists tell the truth by accident." Amber stood on the porch, arms folded like armor. Daniel leaned against the garage doorframe, trying to look bored rather than furious. My mother hovered between them, a human pendulum. "I'll be back tomorrow for the rest of my things," I told her quietly. "I've rented an apartment near the base." She nodded, tears spilling now. "I'm sorry, Emily." "I know," I said. And I did. Sorry. Comes in many flavors. Sorry I got caught. Sorry you're upset. Sorry this is happening. Hers tasted like genuine regret, but not enough to have stopped it. I climbed into my SUV, Scout settling into the passenger seat like she'd been riding there for years. In the rearview mirror, Redbird gleamed under the late afternoon sun, a streak of defiant red against the gray trailer. As I pulled away, I caught a glimpse of my brother's face. For just a moment, it wasn't anger I saw there, but something more complicated, the lost look of a boy who'd never figured out how to be a man. That night, in my sparse new apartment with boxes still unopened and Scout exploring the corners, I sat on the floor with my back against the wall. My phone buzzed with notifications, congratulations from colleagues, a few local news alerts about the grant announcement, a missed call from my mother. But what I kept coming back to was the email from the grant committee, reading it over and over as if to convince myself it was real. "Your dedication to honoring both your grandfather's military service and his practical skills through community outreach exemplifies the spirit of our program. We are particularly impressed by the intergenerational component, passing down not just mechanical knowledge, but the values of precision, patience, and problem-solving to at-risk youth." Pop would have hated the formal language, but loved the meaning. He'd always said that the most important thing you can give a kid isn't a solution, but a way to find one. I slept that night on an air mattress, Scout a warm weight, against my side, and dreamed of garage lights spilling across concrete floors. The next week moved like a boulder rolling into place. We signed the grant papers at a small ceremony at the base's community outreach office. Major Anderson brought a clipboard and a smirk. The director slid the documents to me with a pen, and I signed Captain Emily Carter with Pop's dog tag cool in my fist. We leased a bay off Sycamore Road, a short drive from Camp Liberty. It was nothing fancy. Concrete floors, fluorescent lights, a small office in the back with windows that needed washing. But it had good bones, as Pop would say. High ceilings, solid walls, room to breathe and work. The first thing I did was hang a faded photo of Pop above the main workbench, him in a grease-streaked apron beside a younger me, both of us squinting into summer sun, both of us holding something between our palms. A gear, a future. Redbird took her place in the center of the shop, a queen reclaiming a throne. Scout patrolled the perimeter with the self-approval of a foreman. "This place smells right," Major Anderson, Rachel, off-duty, said, leaning against the doorframe on our first official day. "Like possibility." Nodded, running my hand along the cool metal of a tool cabinet we'd salvaged from the base's surplus. "Now we just need students." We found them through the base's family support services, through local high school counselors, through Pop's old VFW buddies who knew which families were struggling, kids who needed something solid to hold on to. The first teens came quiet and bristling, wearing defensiveness like armor. Luis, tall and lanky with eyes that darted everywhere, taking inventory. Sierra, with dyed blue tips in her dark hair and a permanent scowl that didn't quite hide her curiosity. Jamal, whose fingers twitched constantly, like they needed to be busy to stay out of trouble. Marcus, who wouldn't make eye contact but could name every car model that drove by outside. Kids who had learned to expect the world to offer them broken things and then blame them for not making beauty out of trash. I handed them parts and names. "This is a Torque wrench. It's like a promise. You stop when you reach what's right." We added numbers to the wall. Not lottery numbers or bank balances, but torque values and specs. Truths that don't bend under pressure. Word drifted to Maplewood. Slowly. Some people looked away, embarrassed on my family's behalf. A few called me a show-off. Most just watched. My mother came the second week, hands wrapped around a bakery box. She set it on the workbench and stood awkwardly, watching Luis replace a belt with careful hands. "Your grandfather would love this," she murmured. When she left, She tucked a note under Scout's dish. I'm sorry. I should have said no. Daniel didn't come. Amber posted on social media about being misunderstood and disrespected by military bureaucracy. That post had half a dozen likes and disappeared into the feed like a pebble into a river. The real turning point wasn't a ceremony or a document. It was a Tuesday at dusk when the shop smelled like warm metal and orange cleaner. Sierra tightened the last bolt on Redbird's rebuilt water pump and looked up at me with startled triumph, like people do when the world gives back instead of taking. I did it, she said, not asking, stating. The room breathed. I heard Pop laugh somewhere, low and proud. You did, I confirmed. Want to start it up? Her hands trembled slightly as she slid into the driver's seat. The key turned, and Redbird's engine caught. Immediately, a smooth, powerful rumble that filled the garage like music. Sierra's smile cracked through her careful indifference. Holy shit, she whispered. That's us. We did that. The other kids crowded around, touching fenders and peering under the hood like they were witnessing magic. In a way they were, the magic of cause and effect, of work that yields tangible results. That night after everyone had gone, I drove Redbird home. Scout rode shotgun, eyes forward like a co-pilot. The road unrolled under us. The world simple for 3 miles, just engine and air and the measured click of a turn signal. I pulled into the driveway of my apartment, still sparse but beginning to feel like mine. I was unloading groceries from the trunk when a shadow moved at the edge of the parking lot. Daniel stepped into the pool of security lighting, hands jammed into his jacket pockets despite the warm evening. You humiliated us, he said without preamble. No hello. I set my grocery bags on the hood of my SUV. You tried to sell what wasn't yours. It would have humiliated me to let you. He paced, laughed without humor. You think a grant makes you better? This is a phase. You'll get bored. I looked at my brother and saw a boy who had never once been taught to finish something difficult without applause. No, I said. This is the rest of my life in motion. He stopped pacing. You're cutting me out. Of everything. I'm not cutting, I said gently. I'm drawing a line. You can cross it if you're willing to earn trust instead of taking it. He stared. What does that even mean? It means you apologize. Not to me first, to Mom, for dragging her into a forgery. It means you acknowledge what you did. It means you keep your distance from my program until you can be in a room where a kid is learning and not make it about you. It means you show up quietly and do something useful for once. And it means you do all of that without asking for praise. He wanted to argue. I watched him fight for a lever that didn't exist anymore. Eventually, he left, muttering under his breath, a storm looking for a shore. I went inside and fed Scout. She blinked at me like, you did not die. Excellent. I laughed into the steam of my tea until something in my chest unclenched. The formal justice arrived a week later, wrapped up in a Maplewood County notice. Attempted fraud regarding the car. Title had been flagged due to the federal protective filing and a report from the base's liaison. The county clerk's note to me included a typed line. We appreciate your clarity and service. I didn't seek charges. I didn't need another war. Consequences had already landed, in the form of public record, strained friendships, a community that now knew how close Daniel and Amber came to Hawking and Nye. Heirloom out from under a soldier on the day of her promotion. I pinned the notice to my office corkboard. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Systems can work when people stand their ground with clarity. The workshop, now officially Redbird Hands, developed its own rhythm. Tuesdays and Thursdays after school, Saturday mornings. We started with basics, tool identification, safety protocols, the WALF architecture of engines. The kids absorbed it at different rates. Marcus, so quiet at first, turned out to have an encyclopedic memory for specifications. Sierra had the steadiest hands. Luis asked the most questions, each one more complex than the last. How do you know when something's too broken to fix? He asked me one afternoon, holding a corroded carburetor. You don't, I told him. Until you try. And even then, parts can be salvaged, repurposed. Nothing's ever completely lost. He nodded, turning the part over in his hands. My dad says some things just aren't worth fixing. I met his eyes. Your dad hasn't seen what you can do yet. The restorative piece came quieter than the formal one. My mother started spending afternoons at the shop folding rags, telling kids stories about Pop that I'd never heard, How he taught a boy down the road to rebuild a lawnmower for a summer job. How he fixed a neighbor's washing machine for 2 jars of pickles and a heartfelt thank you. She didn't make excuses for Daniel. She didn't say but. She climbed onto a stool, petted Scout, and learned the names of every teen who walked through the door. I was afraid, she told me one evening as we locked up. When your father left, I became so afraid of rocking the boat that I forgot how to steer it. I handed her a clean shop rag. It's never too late to learn. She dabbed at her eyes. I'm learning from you now. The workshop became more than a classroom. It became a sanctuary, a place where broken things could be understood, where mistakes had clear solutions, where precision was valued over status. The kids brought friends. A local reporter came by to do a small piece for the community section. A retired mechanic from the base volunteered his Thursday afternoons. On base, things shifted too. I was still Captain Carter, still responsible for my unit, still accountable for my decisions. But there was a new current of respect. Not the stiff, regulation kind, but the deeper sort that comes when people see you living your values instead of just talking about them. You've changed, Rachel told me over coffee in the mess hall. Not softer, more definite. I stirred my coffee, considering. I feel more aligned, like I'm the same person at work, at home, in the garage. She nodded. That's rare. Most of us have different faces for different places. General Whitaker stopped by the workshop on a rainy Tuesday, hands tucked into his jacket pockets like the weather didn't bother him. He watched Luis explain to a local reporter how torque specs work. He shook the kid's hand. You're going to make a good sergeant one day, he said. Then he turned to me. Carter, you took a hit and built something better from the impact. Not everyone does. I had a blueprint. I said, nodding at the photo of Pop. The general smiled slightly. Blueprints only work when someone knows how to read them. He left without ceremony, but his visit changed something in the air. The kids stood a little straighter, worked a little more carefully. They'd been seen by someone who mattered. In the quiet hours after everyone left, with just Scout for company, I often sat in Redbird, hands on the wheel, thinking about trajectories. How a small decision, to fight for an inheritance, to write a grant proposal, to draw a firm line, can alter the path of not just one life, but many. How Pop's legacy wasn't just in metal and motor oil, but in the way he taught me to stand. Feet planted, eyes clear, hands ready for work. One evening, I drove out to the cemetery, Redbird rolling smooth, as breath, Scout blinking from the passenger seat like a furry Buddha. I parked under the elm, touched the warm steering wheel, and laughed softly. We did it, Pop, I said. The wind moved the leaves like applause. I didn't need revenge. I needed alignment, of law with love, of service with home, of what I'd been taught with what I was becoming. And I got it. Not all at once, but enough to live by. Daniel came by the workshop on a Saturday morning 3 weeks after our parking lot confrontation. He stood at the entrance for a full minute before stepping in, eyes scanning the room, face tight. Amber wasn't with him. I was helping Jamal align a timing belt, and I didn't stop what I was doing. Daniel hovered near the tool bench, clearly uncomfortable, but making an effort not to show it. Finally, he approached, hat literally in hand, a Washington Nationals cap that he twisted between his fingers. I talked to Mom, he said, voice flat. I apologized. Good, I said, wiping grease from my fingers. Now do it again, and mean it. He swallowed. I do. He shifted, looking everywhere but at me. I was embarrassed that my sister has a room full of people who listen when she speaks, and I can't even keep an oil change appointment. I almost smiled. Humor is where shame goes to heal. Grab a broom, I said. Start there. He did. He swept like the floor owed him money for the first 5 minutes. Then he slowed. Then he started doing it right. The kids watched him out of the corners of their eyes, curious about this adult who wasn't teaching but serving. My mother smiled from her corner stool, hope flickering across her face like sunlight through leaves. Daniel returned the next day, and the next. He didn't ask for as much attention. Every so often, he did a small thing without being asked. Put the tools back where the teens could find them, refilled the hand soap, restocked the shop towels. It wasn't redemption. It was a beginning. Amber sent a text 3 weeks later. I shouldn't have done what I did. It was wrong. I'm sorry. I didn't reply right away. Boundaries don't need to be cruel to be firm. I wrote back the next day. Thank you. The program's doors are open to anyone who wants to help for the right reasons. If that's not you yet, it's okay to stay home until it is. She didn't come. That was, in its way, a kindness. The program grew. We added a second. Class. A local community college professor offered to give the teens credit for their hours in the workshop. A small business grant supplemented our veteran funding. We expanded into basic home repair, teaching skills that translated directly to independence. One afternoon, Sierra brought her younger brother, a quiet 9-year-old named Mateo, who watched everything with solemn eyes. He needs to see this, she told me. He needs to know we can make things. I nodded, understanding completely. Making things, tangible, useful things, is a form of power that no one can take from you. The weather turned cooler. Leaves drifted across the workshop parking lot in russet waves. Inside, Redbird gleamed under the shop lights. No longer just my inheritance, but our classroom, our shared project, our metaphor made metal. The kids had helped me restore her completely now. New upholstery, refreshed chrome, engine purring like a contented cat. Speaking of cats, Scout had become the unofficial mascot of Redbird Hands. She sat on the office desk during paperwork hours and supervised from high shelves during class time. The teens smuggled her treats and took selfies with her when they thought I wasn't looking. A local paper ran a photo of her sitting on the workbench between two torque wrenches like she was the queen of precision. In July, we hosted our first Redbird Hands showcase. The teens invited their families. We set up stations where they explained components in their own words. A grandmother cried while her grandson described timing belts with the authority of an engineer. Sierra demonstrated how to bleed brakes without drama. Luis gave a mini lecture on torque that would have made Pop grin. Daniel helped set up chairs. He didn't take credit, didn't try to be the center of attention. He just worked. My mother brought 3 kinds of cookies and served them with the quiet pride of someone who has found her place in a story. I drove Redbird onto the street in front of the shop and let each kid sit in the driver's seat for a photo. The line was long. Dignity is contagious when people can touch it. That night, after the lights were off and the shop hummed with the sound of cooling metal, I sat on the floor with my back against Redbird's bumper. Scout padded over, curled into my lap, and rumbled a small purr that buzzed straight through my sternum. I looked up at, Pop's photo and felt it. The deep, right quiet of a promise kept. The next morning, a letter arrived from the grant committee. They wanted to expand the program to neighboring towns, connect with other bases. They asked if I'd consider training more mentors. Rachel texted, "Told you torque values are just trust values in disguise." Onward, Cap. And my uniform? Some nights I hung it by the door and stood back to look at it the way a kid looks at a superhero cape. Most mornings I put it on with hands that knew exactly who they belonged to. If someone called it a costume now, the words rolled off like rain from wax. Not because I stopped caring, but because I knew what it cost me to stand in it and what it gave to others when I did. I was Captain Emily Carter in the garage and Captain Emily Carter on base. The lines between duty and love, between service and purpose, had blurred into something stronger than either alone could be. And in that blurring, I found my truest self, the one Pop had seen all along. Fall brought a crisp edge to Virginia mornings and new challenges to Redbird Hands. The program had outgrown our single bay. We needed more space, more tools, more structure. The waiting list for new students stretched to 15 names, kids who had heard from friends that there was a place where adults took you seriously and broken things became whole again. General Whitaker called me into his office one Tuesday morning. I arrived in uniform, standing at attention until he waved me into a chair. "At ease, Carter. This isn't about your military duties." He pushed a folder across his desk. "This is about your community initiative." I opened it to find blueprints for a disused maintenance facility on the edge of Camp Liberty. 3 bays, office space, storage rooms, all sitting empty since budget cuts 5 years ago. "The base commander and I have been discussing how to better integrate community relations with our veteran support programs," he said, his voice matter of fact, but his eyes warm. "This facility needs a purpose. Your program needs a home." I stared at the blueprints, my mind racing through possibilities. "Sir, this is—" "Don't thank me yet," he interrupted. "There's paperwork, red tape. You'll need to formally apply for the space through proper channels. But I've been told your grant application skills are exceptional." I smiled. "Yes, sir. And Carter?" He leaned forward slightly. "Your grandfather would be proud of what you've built. Not just the program, the boundaries, the clarity." I swallowed hard. "Thank you, sir." The application process was intense. environmental assessments, safety inspections, insurance requirements. Rachel helped me navigate the military bureaucracy. My mother organized a letter-writing campaign from community members. Even Daniel contributed, cataloging our current tools and equipment to demonstrate what we already had and what we still needed. Meanwhile, the current workshop hummed with activity. Sierra had been accepted to a technical college with a full scholarship, but still came every Saturday to mentor younger students. Luis had designed a modified engine component that made repairs easier for people with limited hand strength, an innovation that caught the attention of a local engineering firm. Marcus, once so silent, now led orientation sessions for new students, his quiet voice steady with confidence. The seasons turned. Red and gold leaves gave way to bare branches against gray skies. We got word just before Thanksgiving, red bird hands had been approved for the base facility. We would move in January. The news spread through Maplewood like a brush fire. Most reactions were positive. Pride that a local program had gained military recognition, excitement about expanded opportunities for local youth, but not all. Amber accosted me outside the grocery store one frosty evening, her breath clouding in the cold air. "So now you're taking over government property?" she said, blocking my path to my car. "What's next, Emily? Running for mayor?" I set my bags in my trunk, deliberately calm. "It's an empty building being put to good use, that's all." "That's never all with you." Her voice had the bitter edge I remembered from that morning in my mother's kitchen. "Daniel's different now. Quiet, like you've broken something in him." I looked at her directly. "I didn't break anything. I just stopped pretending things weren't already broken." She huffed. "He spends hours at that garage. For what? To sweep floors? To be your servant? To be part of something that matters," I said. "To rebuild." He used to have ambition. Her eyes were hard. Real plans, not playing mechanic with troubled kids. "Those troubled kids have names," I said, my voice low but firm. "They have futures, and they're learning more about real ambition, the kind that builds something lasting, than you seem to understand." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You think you're so perfect, don't you? Captain Carter, savior of lost causes." I didn't rise to the bait. "I'm not perfect. I'm persistent. There's a difference." She turned to leave, then paused. "He doesn't talk about money anymore. Our money, our future. It's like he's forgotten what matters. Or remembered," I said softly. I watched her walk away, her expensive boots clicking on the asphalt, and felt a strange mix of pity and relief. Some people never see the value in work that doesn't shine on the surface. Christmas came, bringing with it a light dusting of snow and the quiet intimacy of short days. I hosted a small gathering at my apartment. Rachel, my mother, Daniel, and a few of the older students who didn't have family celebrations. Scout supervised from the top of the bookshelf, wearing a tiny red bow that Luis had fashioned for her from a ribbon. We ate turkey sandwiches and my mother's famous apple pie. We exchanged simple gifts, practical things mostly. Rachel gave me a new set of wrenches. I gave Daniel a vintage car manual I'd found at a flea market. He gave me a framed photograph of Pop and me in front of Redbird from when I was about 12, covered in grease and grinning. "I found it in Mom's attic," he said quietly. "Thought it belonged with you." It was the first gift from him in years that wasn't expensive, impersonal, or both. I hugged him, feeling the awkward stiffness in his shoulders slowly relax. "Thank you," I said, and meant it. After everyone left, I sat with Scout in my lap, looking at the photograph. Pop's face was turned slightly toward me, his expression holding that specific mix of pride and amusement that adults get when children surprise them in good ways. My own face was all determination and joy, grease streaked across one cheek like war. Paint. I realized with a start that I was now older than Pop had been in that photo. The thought settled strangely in my chest, a weight that wasn't quite sadness, but a recognition of time's passage, of the torch that had been passed. I slept that night with the photograph on my nightstand, dreaming of engines that spoke in Pop's voice and roads that led home no matter which direction you drove. The new facility transformed Redbird hands in ways I hadn't anticipated. The extra space allowed us to work on multiple projects simultaneously. The military-grade equipment elevated the precision of our work. The location on base provided a layer of structure and security that put parents at ease. But the most profound change was in perception. Being housed on a military installation gave the program legitimacy in the eyes of the community. Suddenly, local businesses wanted to donate supplies. The high school guidance counselor referred her most promising students, not just those deemed at risk. The community college formalized our partnership into an official pre-apprenticeship program. Moving day was a community effort. Students, parents, volunteers from the VFW, and even a few of my unit members formed a convoy of pickup trucks and trailers. Redbird led the procession, gleaming in the winter sunlight as I drove her slowly down the base access road, scout riding shotgun as always. Daniel organized the moving teams with surprising efficiency, assigning tasks based on people's strengths and keeping the atmosphere light with terrible dad jokes he must have been saving up for months. My mother managed refreshments, making sure everyone stayed fueled and hydrated. Rachel coordinated with base security, ensuring all our civilian helpers had proper access. The facility itself was industrial and stark. Concrete floors, steel beams, utilitarian lighting. But by the end of the day, it had begun to transform. Pop's photo took its place of honor on the main wall. The students' certification papers lined the office corridor. Tools found their designated homes on pegboards and in cabinets. And Redbird claimed her spot in the center of the main bay, a splash of vibrant red against the gray background. As everyone left that evening, tired but satisfied, I found myself alone in the cavernous space, footsteps echoing. Scout prowled the perimeter, inspecting every corner with professional thoroughness. "What do you think, Pop?" I asked aloud, looking up at his photograph. "Did we do okay?" The silence held its own answer, not empty, but expectant, full of possibility. The winter months passed in a blur of activity. We expanded our curriculum beyond auto mechanics to include basic electrical work, plumbing, and carpentry. We started a small engine repair service to generate additional funding. We even hosted a weekend workshop for military spouses interested in learning home maintenance skills. Through it all, Redbird remained our centerpiece, not just a restoration project anymore, but a teaching tool, a symbol, a connection to why we started in the first place. Sierra came home from her first semester at technical college over spring break. She walked into the new facility and whistled low. "Damn, Captain C, you've come up in the world." I smiled. "We all have." She ran her hand along Redbird's fender with the reverence of someone touching a significant piece of their past. "She looks even better than I remember. The kids took care of her while you were gone. They wanted to impress you when you came back." Sierra's eyes widened slightly. "Me? Why? Would they care what I think?" "Because you're proof that what we do here matters, that it leads somewhere." She ducked her head, but not before I caught the flush of pride on her face. "I'm passing all my classes," she said. "My professors say I came in better prepared than most first years." "Of course you did," I said. "You rebuilt a water pump from scratch. College math is nothing after that." She laughed, then grew serious. "I've been thinking about coming back after graduation, maybe teaching here part-time, giving back, you know? We'd be lucky to have you," I said, meaning every word. One Wednesday afternoon in early April, I was reviewing grant reports in the office when Daniel knocked on the doorframe. He'd become a regular fixture at the workshop, still quiet but increasingly comfortable. The kids had started calling him Mr. D and asking for his help with specific tasks. "Got a minute?" he asked. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "What's up?" He sat, fidgeting slightly. "Amber and I are separating." I set down my pen. "I'm sorry, Daniel." He shook his head. "Don't be. It's been coming for a while. We want different things." He looked out the window toward the main bay where students were working. "I want this. Something real. She wants status, appearances. What will you do?" "I've been taking online courses in business management." He gave a small, self-deprecating smile. "Figured if I'm going to be hanging around here anyway, I might as well make myself useful. Maybe help with the administrative side of things." I stared at him, genuinely surprised. "You'd want to work here? Officially? If you'll have me." His voice was quiet, but steady. "I know I haven't earned it yet, but I'm trying." I thought about the Daniel who had mocked my uniform, who had tried to sell Redbird behind my back, and I looked at the man sitting across from me now, humbled, honest, seeking purpose. "It wouldn't be easy," I said. "We'd need clear boundaries. Professional ones. This can't be about making amends to me. It has to be about the program, the kids." He nodded. "I understand that. I've been watching you build this for months now. I see what it means, what it does for people. I want to be part of that, the right way." I extended my hand across the desk. "Then welcome aboard, provisionally." He shook it, his grip firm. I won't let you down. Not again. After he left, I sat back in my chair, processing. Scout jumped onto the desk and settled beside my paperwork, tail twitching thoughtfully. What do you think? I asked her. Can people really change that much? She blinked slowly, which I chose to interpret as cautious optimism. That evening, I drove Redbird home with the windows down, letting the soft spring air flow through the cabin. The cherry blossoms were starting to bloom along the base perimeter, dusting the roadside with pale pink. At a stoplight, a car pulled up beside me, a sleek, modern thing with tinted windows and a showroom shine. The window rolled down to reveal Amber, perfectly styled as always. She looked at Redbird, then at me. You really love that old thing, don't you? She said, not unkindly. I do. I replied. But it's not just about the car. She nodded, a flash of something like understanding crossing her face. Daniel told you? Yes. He's different now. Quieter. More centered. She said it like she was still trying to decide if it was a compliment or a criticism. That's your influence. That's his choice, I corrected gently. The light turned green. She hesitated, then said, Take care of him, okay? Before I could respond, she accelerated away, her car sleek and silent and somehow lonely against the backdrop of spring. I drove home slowly, thinking about choices and consequences, about the different forms of wealth, about how sometimes losing is actually finding something better. In July, we hosted our first annual Redbird Hands graduation ceremony. The day dawned clear and bright, a Virginia summer day that shimmered with heat but wasn't yet oppressive. I stood in the main bay of our facility, watching as Daniel and 3 of our advanced students arranged folding chairs in neat rows. More to the left, Daniel directed, gesturing with clipboard precision. We need a clear path for the procession. I smiled to myself. In 6 months, my brother had transformed. From reluctant helper to enthusiastic program coordinator. He had organized today's event down to the minute, from the refreshments, catered by a local veteran-owned bakery, to the certificates, printed on heavy stock paper with the Redbird Hands logo he'd helped design. Nervous? Rachel asked, appearing at my elbow in crisp civilian clothes, her military bearing still evident in her posture. A little, I admitted. This feels bigger than just a workshop celebration. It is bigger, she said. You're not just certifying skills. You're validating futures. The ceremony was scheduled for noon. By 11, families began arriving. Parents, siblings, grandparents, all dressed in their Sunday best, carrying bouquets and cameras. At 11:30, General Whitaker arrived with the base, commander and the county superintendent of schools, adding an official gravitas to the proceedings. Our graduating class consisted of 12 students who had completed the full program, including Luis, Marcus, and 5 others from our original group. They gathered in the office area, nervously adjusting their clothes and practicing their speeches. Each would present a brief description of their final project and their future plans. At precisely noon, Daniel cued the music, not pomp and circumstance, but a guitar arrangement of an old Johnny Cash song that Pop used to whistle while he worked. The students processed in, looking both proud and slightly embarrassed by the attention, as all teenagers do at such moments. I took my place at the podium, Scout watching regally from her perch on a nearby tool cabinet. Welcome to the first annual Redbird Hands certification ceremony, I began, scanning the room filled with supportive faces. When my grandfather taught me how to work on engines, he wasn't just teaching me mechanics. He was teaching me life, how to approach problems methodically, how to have patience with difficult tasks, how to take pride in work well done. Today, these 12 students have learned those same lessons, and so much more. I gestured to Redbird, gleaming under spotlight in the center of the bay. This car represents our program's heart, not because it's valuable or beautiful, though it is both those things, but because it's a tangible reminder that what others might discard as outdated or broken can be restored with skill, patience, and care. From there, each student presented their final project. Luis demonstrated his modified engine component, now patented with help from the local engineering firm that had offered him an apprenticeship. Marcus showed photographs of the motorcycle he had rebuilt from salvaged parts, explaining each step with quiet confidence. One by one, they stood and spoke. These kids who had once been labeled at risk, now experts in their own right. After the presentations, I called each student forward to receive their certification. As I handed out the last certificate, I spotted my mother in the audience, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Beside her sat an elderly man I recognized as one of Pop's oldest friends from the VFW, nodding with approval at each student's accomplishment. General Whitaker gave a brief speech about the importance of practical skills and community connection. The superintendent announced that the local school board had approved Red Bird Hands as an official alternative education credit for the coming school year. And then Daniel stepped forward with a surprise. "We have one more presentation," he said, taking the podium. "The students and staff of Red Bird Hands would like to recognize the person who made all this possible." He unveiled a plaque that would hang beside Pop's photograph. It read, "Red Bird Hands Workshop, founded by Captain Emily Carter, in honor of Sergeant Harold Pop Carter." You tighten a lug nut as if someone's life depends on it, because one day it might. Beneath this was a photograph of me with the first class of students, all of us leaning against Redbird, grease-stained and grinning. "Emily," Daniel continued, his voice steady, "you've taught us all that integrity isn't just a word. It's work. It's showing up. It's doing the right thing even when no one is watching. And you've shown us that redemption is possible, not through grand gestures, but through consistent effort and humble service." I hadn't expected to cry, but I felt tears. Threatening. Louise stepped forward, holding something covered with a shop cloth. "We made this for you, Captain C," he said, unveiling a miniature replica of Redbird, crafted from salvaged metal parts, each piece carefully welded and painted. "So you'll always remember how it started." The reception afterward was lively. Punch and sandwiches, proud parents taking photos, students showing off their workstations to younger siblings. I circulated through the crowd, accepting congratulations and answering questions about enrollment for the fall. As the event wound down, I found myself standing beside Redbird with General Whitaker. "You've built something significant here, Carter," he said, running an appreciative hand along the car's fender. "Something that will outlast all of us." "Thank you, sir," I said. "But I had help." He nodded toward Daniel, who was patiently explaining the intake system to an interested father. "Family can surprise you, sometimes in good ways." "Yes, sir," I agreed. "Sometimes they can." Later, after everyone had gone and the facility was quiet again, I sat in Redbird's driver's seat, the miniature replica on the dashboard in front of me. Scout jumped through the open window and settled into the passenger seat, her customary spot. "We did good, didn't we?" I asked her. She yawned, which I took as agreement. I started the engine, letting its rumble fill the empty space. In that moment, I felt Pop's presence so strongly it took my breath away, not as a ghost or a memory, but as a continuation, the work of his hands living on through mine, and now through the hands of these students. I drove home that night with the windows down, the warm summer air carrying the scent of freshly cut grass and distant rain. The future stretched before me like an open road, not perfect, not without challenges, but clear and true. 3 years passed, each one bringing growth and change to Redbird Hands. We expanded to 3 locations: our original base facility, AE, satellite workshop in downtown Maplewood, and a mobile unit that traveled to rural schools. We added programs for veterans transitioning to civilian life, single parents needing practical skills, and senior citizens wanting to maintain their independence. Daniel became our full-time operations director, bringing organizational skills I'd never known he possessed. He started dating one of the community college instructors who partnered with our program, a practical, kind-hearted woman who appreciated his newfound steadiness. They moved slowly, thoughtfully, building something that looked like it might last. My mother volunteered 3 days a week, mentoring younger students and becoming the unofficial historian of the program. She collected stories from graduates, tracking their progress through technical schools and apprenticeships, creating a wall of success that inspired each new class. Sierra returned after completing her degree, joining us as our first paid instructor. Her curriculum innovations brought statewide attention to the program, earning us a feature in a national education magazine. Luis's component design was now being manufactured by a veteran-owned business in Richmond, with a percentage of profits supporting our scholarship fund. As for me, I continued to balance my military duties with program oversight. The Army recognized Red Bird Hands as a model for military community engagement, and I occasionally traveled to other bases to help establish similar initiatives. Through it all, Redbird remained our heart and soul, still teaching, still inspiring, still running as smoothly as the day Pop and I had first restored her. And Scout, now a distinguished 7-year-old with a touch of gray around her muzzle, continued her supervisory duties with unwavering dedication. On a golden October afternoon, I received a call from a lawyer in Richmond, the executor of Pop's estate. "Captain Carter," he said, "I've been going through your grandfather's remaining papers, and I've found something I think you should see. Are you available to come to my office tomorrow?" I rearranged my schedule and drove to Richmond the next morning, curious but not concerned. Pop's affairs had been settled years ago. This was likely just some forgotten paperwork needing a signature. The lawyer's office was in an old brick building downtown with worn, wooden floors and tall windows. He greeted me with a firm handshake and led me to a conference room where several folders were arranged on the table. "Your grandfather was a remarkably thorough man," he said, taking a seat. He anticipated situations most people wouldn't think to prepare for. He opened the first folder, revealing yellowed paperwork, military documents, service records, and what appeared to be property deeds. "Sergeant Carter purchased a small commercial property in Maplewood in 1978, the lawyer explained. "It was a garage that he leased to various businesses over the years. The most recent lease expired 3 months ago." I nodded, vaguely remembering a building on Maple Street that Pop had mentioned once or twice. "What's unusual," the lawyer continued, "is that he left very specific instructions about this property. It was to remain leased until either 5 years after his passing, or until you established what he called a proper teaching shop. At that point, the property would transfer to you with certain conditions." He handed me an envelope with my name written in Pop's distinctive handwriting. Inside was a letter, dated just 6 months before he died. "Emily, if you're reading this, it means you've done what I always knew you would. You've built something worthwhile, something that lasts. The old garage on Maple Street is yours now. I bought it when you were still in diapers, thinking someday we might work there together. Life had other plans, but I held on to it, knowing that some spaces have a purpose that takes time to reveal itself. There are 3 conditions. 1. The property must be used for education, teaching hands-on skills to those who need them most. 2. Redbird must have a permanent home there, visible to all who enter. 3. You must continue to tighten lug nuts as if someone's life depends on it. Because it always does. I've left funds for renovation in the account detailed in the attached papers. Make it yours, Em. Make it. Something that will outlast both of us. With pride, Pop." I read the letter twice, my vision blurring. The lawyer quietly pushed a box of tissues toward me. "There's more," he said gently. "The renovation fund is substantial. Your grandfather made some wise investments over the years, and the property itself is in a prime location, recently rezoned for mixed-use development." He showed me photographs of a solid brick building with large bay doors and high ceilings, weathered but structurally sound, much like Redbird had been when I first started working on her. "This is legally binding?" I asked. "Absolutely. The deed is ready for transfer today if you accept the conditions." I signed the papers with Pop's dog tag warm against my chest, where I'd worn it every day since he'd pressed it into my palm. The lawyer handed me a set of keys, old-fashioned, heavy metal ones that felt right in my hand. That evening, I drove to the address on Maple Street. The building stood on a corner lot, its red brick facade glowing in the sunset light. I unlocked the main door and stepped inside, flipping on lights that illuminated a cavernous space with concrete floors and timber beams. Dust motes danced in the air, but beneath the years of disuse, I could see the bones of something magnificent. I walked the perimeter slowly, already envisioning classrooms, workstations, a community gathering space. Large windows would let in natural light. The original beams would remain exposed, and in the center, under a spotlight just like at our current facility, Redbird would hold court. My phone buzzed, a text from Daniel. "Where are you? Mom's worried." I sent him the address with the message. "Come see our future." They arrived 20 minutes later. Daniel, my mother, and Rachel, all curious and slightly concerned. They stood in the doorway, taking in the empty space. "Pop left it to me," I explained, showing them the letter. "For Redbird hands." My mother walked to the center of the room, turning slowly. "He bought this place the year you were born," she said softly. "I remember him talking about it. His investment in the future, he called it. I thought he meant retirement." "He meant legacy," I said. Daniel was already pacing the space, mentally measuring. "The possibilities here are incredible. We could double our enrollment, add specialized classrooms, maybe even a small engine repair business, to generate sustainable income." Rachel examined the electrical panel with professional interest. The infrastructure is solid. You'd need updates, but the basics are good. They scattered through the building, calling out discoveries. A loft space perfect for an office, a side room ideal for a computer lab, a small courtyard in back where students could take breaks. I stood in the center, feeling the space embraced me like an old friend. This wasn't just a building. It was a culmination of Pop's foresight, of my persistence, of all the work we'd done and all the lives we'd touched. That weekend, we brought the current students to see the new space. They wandered through it with wide eyes, pointing out features, imagining possibilities. Luis immediately identified the perfect spot for Redbird. Marcus started sketching layout ideas on a notepad. Sierra tested the acoustics by whistling sharply, grinning at the echo. "This is really ours?" she asked, disbelief coloring her voice. "It's everyone's who needs it," I said. The renovation took 6 months. We continued operating from our base facility while contractors updated electrical systems, reinforced structural elements, and installed modern amenities. Daniel oversaw the project with meticulous attention to detail, honoring both safety requirements and Pop's vision. On a bright spring morning, we held the grand opening of the permanent Redbird Hands Workshop and Community Center. The mayor cut a ribbon. The local paper sent a photographer. Former students returned to see the new space, bringing stories of their successes and sometimes their own children. General Whitaker attended in civilian clothes, now retired but still commanding respect. "Carter," he said, surveying the renovated space with approval. "When I first read your grant proposal years ago, I knew you were building more than a program. You were building a legacy." Redbird held pride of place in the main workshop area, gleaming under skylights that bathed her in natural sunshine. Scout supervised from a custom-built perch that gave her a view of the entire operation, older now but still watchful, still protective. After the official ceremonies, after the crowds had thinned and the caterers had packed up, I found myself alone in the quiet building. I walked to Redbird and ran my hand along her familiar contours, feeling the cool, metal warm beneath my touch. "We did it, Pop," I said to the empty air. "We made something that will last." I sat in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel, remembering all the hours Pop and I had spent together working on this car, all the lessons learned, all the values transmitted not through words but through work, precision, patience, perseverance. My uniform hung in my office now, still worn, with pride when duty called, but no longer my only identity. I was Captain Carter on base, Director Carter at the workshop, Emily to my family and friends. All the same person, all aligned, all true. I didn't need revenge against those who had once dismissed me, tried to take what was mine. I needed only this, the quiet satisfaction of promises kept, of work well done, of a legacy honored and extended. In the gleaming reflection of Redbird's hood, I caught a glimpse of myself. Older now, stronger, more certain. The person Pop had always seen, even when I couldn't see it myself. The person who knew that sometimes the greatest victory isn't in winning a fight, but in building something worth fighting for. Scout jumped into the passenger seat and settled with a contented sigh. Outside, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the workshop floor. In the distance, I could hear the sounds of Maplewood going about its business, cars passing, people talking, life continuing in its steady rhythm. I started Redbird's engine, letting it idle with that perfect purr that only comes from machinery loved and maintained with care. The sound filled the space like music, a continuation, not an ending, a promise still being kept, a future still unfolding. And in that moment, I understood what Pop had always known, that the true measure of a life isn't in what you own, but in what you build. Not in what you keep, but in what you pass on. Not in how others see you, but in how steadily you stand. I had promised my grandfather I'd protect what mattered, and I had. Not just a car, but a purpose. Not just an inheritance, but a legacy. Not just my dignity, but something far more powerful. The truth of who I was meant to be.